Hi guys, welcome to Hydra Collectables, where we let our geek flag fly. My name's Luke and I'm your host, and today we're doing part 3, that's right, we've done 3 of these bad boys, of our interviews with Mr. Kevin Eastman, the turtle legend himself. So yeah, if you haven't already checked out my previous 2 interviews with Kevin Eastman, I'd like to encourage you to do so. There is a whole playlist right here on the channel. And yeah, without further ado, let's get to it.
How are you? Good to see you again.
I'm very well, thank you. Kevin, it's so great to have you back on the show. This is our 3rd installment, and yeah, I kind of wanted to backtrack a little bit because in the past you and I have spoken, and we've always gone for those more obscure questions. However, this time I want to backtrack it, go over some familiar territory, and basically ask you how it all began. Why turtles, and how did it all start?
Sure. The concept of the turtles really evolved out of a couple things. Peter and I, our love and passion for all things comic books, sort of centered and focused around our hero Jack Kirby. We wanted to become Jack Kirby, or follow in his footsteps, better said. And so we were looking for different ideas. The first character we actually came up with together was Pete's brainchild called Fugitoid, which became then part of the Turtle universe. But sort of in a bout of goofing around, inspired by everything from Cerebus to Daredevil to New Mutants to mutant characters, things like that, we sort of picked some of our favorite things and rolled them all into one sort of idea, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And the Turtles actually came from, when I was younger, growing up, my grandmother lived on a lake, and that lake had a runoff. And then the runoff was, kind of a marshy, swampy area that was just full of turtles. And I loved hanging out there and playing with the turtles and looking at them, because I thought they were just like dinosaurs. The closest thing we'll ever get to dinosaurs in our world, and snapping turtles and painted turtles and all kinds of things. I was just fascinated by them. So it was really that, and the natural joke of a slow-moving turtle being a fast-moving martial artist. It just seemed to be naturally funny. So it really was sort of a having a laugh, and just putting together some crazy ideas. And we said, well, this is really fun. We should come up with a story that tells how these characters got to be the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And that was 1983. Comic came out in 84.
That's very cool. Yeah, turtles are amazing creatures, and I actually grew up with one in my family home, and yeah, he's still kicking to this day. He's actually older than me, so he's doing very well. So yeah, a big part of the Turtles' origin story is that of the mutagen ooze. How did that come about, and how closely related to Daredevil is that story?
The mutagen ooze was one of those ideas that was a very comic booky kind of comic book inspired, in that the Incredible Hulk being exposed to different kinds of radiation, the Fantastic Four having been exposed to gamma rays and things like that in outer space, to um, um, Peter Parker being bit by a radioactive spider. There was all kinds of really funny ideas of how these characters got to be become superpowered. And so with the ooze, we didn't want to have to go into a lot of specific scientific definition of what it was. And so we later explored it a bit more and created this sort of alien origin of the actual substance, the ooze substance. But it was just that. It's something that we could say, oh, they were mutated by an ooze, and not have to give a lot more details, because we didn't have them. So that was it. It was a very comic booky sort of origin, inspiration for the origin story and the mutation process.
So rest assured there are no Marvel lawyers watching, so we can speak freely. But just how many references to Daredevil are there within the Turtles?
Our inspirations for all things turtles, rooted in so many different pop culture things, and we did more as the turtles evolved. Certainly the stories that Peter and I did, everything from Star Wars to Star Trek to you name it. If it was even things like Big Trouble in Little China, and the inspiration for Casey Jones, and just so many different elements. But it was really, Daredevil was a comic book that I was really fond of. Even before Frank Miller, it was Bill Everett and Bob Brown and Gene Colan. It was just some of this. I just love that storyline, and what Frank Miller did with it was really mind blowing. He turned it around completely and became even cooler to a character I already loved. So things that he brought, like Stick as Daredevil's teacher and mentor. We evolved Splinter from that, and then the hand, which is the foot, and even some of the accidental process of how Daredevil was born, with the radiation hitting him near the eyes. We had the ooze, and so there was different bits and pieces, but a lot of it, even before that, was rooted in a character like Cerebus. The Aardvark was a parody of Conan when it first started, and that was a self-published book that was really inspirational to us. But I take it back to even the mutant aspect of Jack Kirby's Commandy comics, which was this wonderful Planet of the Apes based concept, which all animals evolved into ruling the earth, and after a great disaster and stuff. And that was one of my all-time favorites. So I think that was, Mutant Animals was there with me to stay in a big way from Kirby onward, and then mutants as characters were just really fun to do, and you put everything in the tub and mix it up, mutants and ninjas and everything. But there's a lot in there. I'm trying to think of something specific as a nuance, but there's lots of nods and nudges to lots of pop culture genre things and throughout the Turtles history.
Cool. So the Turtles have very unique names. How did you decide that you were going to name them after these famous artists?
The naming of the Turtles was something that was very scary to Peter and I at the time, and that once it's there, it's there, for short or forever, depending on whatever the life of the characters. And so when we started discussing what should we call them, traditional Asian names was our first inspiration based on their history and the martial arts things, the heritage, the history of that Asian culture. And then we felt the idea is kind of goofy, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and so we said, well, it should be something a bit sillier. We originally thought maybe Doug, Bob, Steve, something really kind of Americanized or English language, kind of funny, but it was still, to me, didn't feel funny enough. And to us, and I was a huge fan of history, especially art history, up to and including I did a mural in my high school, class of 1980, where there was a mural that was a tribute to Leonardo da Vinci. And so I mentioned to Pete, I said, well, why don't we go to an extreme, and how about something like, Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Raphael? and he laughed, and that was our barometer. We felt that it made us laugh, so we thought it was funny. It was odd enough, and it fit. And there was a short discussion between Peter and I for Donatello, because I like the sculptor named Bernini a bit better. And so Donatello was almost named Bernini, but I like the Donatello, like Leonardo, Michelangelo. So it just was evolved out of a sweet and funny place, and it stuck. And I love it. It's great.
So one last question, Kevin, because I know that we're pressed for time. I absolutely love the original live-action 1990s movie of TMNT. So much so that I've actually introduced both my two children to that movie, and they too absolutely love it. Now, a little birdie tells me that you used to own, or maybe you still do own, an original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Jim Henson suit. How did that come about? How did you acquire it, and do you still have it?
Well, first off, best turtle movie ever, period, hands down. That very first Steve Barron directed, Todd Langdon was the final writer who adapted the story from the original comics, and we all bow down humbly and so respectfully to Jim Henson's Creature Shop, who brought them to life and made them work the way that they did, because that was it. If you didn't believe what you were looking at. If you didn't believe they were real, didn't have that suspension of belief, then it just never would have worked. And Jim Henson is responsible for making them work, and so incredibly awesome. So the discussion began early on during production, like, holy smokes, it'd be great to get one of these suits. Both Peter and I wanted one, and how would we do that, and things. And the problem is that the materials that they were made out of, this latex, it literally it would start corroding or start decomposing the minute you pulled it out of the mold. It all had a very short lifespan, and even, you know, with sort of coating it with certain protective elements and things like that would preserve it a little bit longer. But any exposure to air would just sort of would dry it out, because it was like this liquid sort of, you know, latex that was pliable enough for people to wear and breathable. So it was built to not last very long. In fact, even on when they were filming in North Carolina, they had to keep them in refrigerated trucks and things like that. So we worked out a series of things, trades. So I ended up with a Leonardo, and Pete ended up with a Donatello. You know, we kept it as best we could, but it steadily started to decompose. And I found this great artist, Thomas Spinner, who's got a prop shop and does a lot of restoration based in it was in Massachusetts. I think it's in New York State now. And he volunteered to step up to the incredible and difficult task of restoring the original costume. And he did an amazing job, having to rebuild whole sections of it that had just completely rotted away. But the undercarriage, the under suit, the mechanisms, because it wasn't one of the talking ones, it was just one of the stunt ones, but he built everything that needed to be rebuilt, but used as much of the original costume as he could. So we repaired it, built it, and then sold it through the prop store a number of years ago. But it was great to see it. It was a real treat, because that's always will be my favorite Turtles movie ever.
Yeah, mine too. Absolutely. Kevin, thank you so much. I know time's of the essence, so I'm going to love you and leave you and let you go. But this has been fantastic. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. You take care. We'll talk again soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.